Visual Literacy, a series of YouTube videos based on the Visual Literacy Workbook for graphic design and fine art students by David Moyer and Brian Flynn, published by Oxford University Press. Chapter 5, The Illusion of Space. The appearance of three-dimensional space on a two-dimensional picture plane is an illusion achieved through the imitation of our perception of the natural world. Atmospheric or aerial perspective and linear perspective are two systematic approaches to achieve the illusion. Aerial perspective is achieved by imitating the changes in the perception of form as it recedes in space. Receding forms appear to overlap, become smaller, their parts appear closer together, lose detail and appearance, as well as value and intensity of color. Their value and color contrast with their surroundings becomes less prominent the greater their distance from the viewer. Spatial distances, or depth, is categorized as foreground, closest to the viewer, midground, and background, farthest from the viewer. Linear perspective is a system for the delineation of the illusion of deep space based on the fixed vantage point of a viewer, and can be quite complex. A detailed exploration of its intricacies are beyond the scope of this book. The process begins with the establishment of a horizon line where Earth meets sky, representing the vantage point of the viewer. Vantage points can be low, which establishes a low horizon line, middle, which establishes a horizon line in the middle section of the picture plane, or high, which establishes a high horizon line. Forms with edges not parallel to the picture plane will recede in space with the suggested or orthogonal line, continuing from the form's edge to a point on the horizon line known as the vanishing point. Parallel edges of receding forms meet at a common vanishing point. An image's forms and spatial environment may require 1, 2, or 3 vanishing points, and vanishing points tangent to them if there are inclined planes. Claude Lorrain's Perseus and the Origin of Coral is a wash drawing in sepia and brown-gray inks, rendering the illusion of deep spatial depth. This example of atmospheric perspective relies on the contrast of values, light and dark inks, to achieve its foreground, midground, and background planes of space. The foreground is established by the tree and wedge-shaped spit of land in the lower left quadrant of the picture plane, which is the area of greatest difference between light and dark. The receding features of the landscape overlap one another and decrease in size and value contrast the further they are from the viewer, the background bits of landscape being almost indistinguishable from the sky and clouds. Albert Bierstadt's Lander's Peak creates the illusion of three-dimensional space through dark and light-valued spatial planes that repeat in an alternating rhythm from foreground to background. The rich dark-shadowed green establishes the foreground plane of space, which is succeeded by a middle ground green made lighter by a shaft of bright sunlight, followed by a deep midground green fallen into shadow. The background plane jumps into deep space in light blue and gray-green forms containing minimal color and value contrasts. Salvator Mundi by Hans Memling is a painting exhibiting the tenets of aerial or atmospheric perspective to achieve the illusion of deep space within the image. Christ, in a position of blessing the world, is the largest form in the composition and is dressed in a warm red garment, his skin and hair being of high value contrast, establishes the foreground plane of space. The midground forms are much smaller and of a cooler green hue, causing the illusion of a dramatic jump into deep space. The background forms are smaller yet in scale and are of a much cooler blue-green color, meeting the horizon and blue sky of low saturation. Alessandro Botticelli uses one-point linear perspective to create a dramatic illusion of deep three-dimensional space in the Annunciation. The angel Gabriel and the Virgin Mary face one another in a line parallel to the surface of the picture plane and the planes of the rear wall and four edges of the rectilinear columns. The tops of their heads are tangent to the horizontal axis of symmetry that indicates the vertical center of the composition. Their chins rest gently on the picture's horizon line. The receding edges of the forward architectural planes meet at a central vanishing point, nearly touching the angel Gabriel's bowed forehead. The horizontal plane, created by the figures of Gabriel and the Virgin Mary, is in stark contrast with the velocity of the spatial recession created by the one-point perspective of the interior architecture and the progressive rhythms created by the repetition of the horizontal edges of the rugs and the vertical rectilinear columns. Please join us as we continue to explore visual form and content in upcoming videos.